You're listening to another episode of the Just Go Bike podcast. That's AKA Murph.
And that's AP. And this is the podcast where we talk about cycling just for the fun of it, with tales from all over the nation. Come for the bikes, stay for the fun, and leave with a smile.
Hello, Just Go Bike listeners, and hello, Murph.
Well, hello, AP and listeners. So what's new, Andrea?
Well, let me tell you, it is spooky season.
Okay, I know you're probably going to tell me something interesting, but in my neighborhood, you know how I live in the arts and culture district? Well, some entity put scarecrows on all the corners of the different blocks in the area, but they're not like just scarecrows that you would see, in a garden or something. They're kind of spooky and a little bit aggressive, and they look like people have been murdered on every corner. And so, yeah, cruising around at night is a little spooky in my neighborhood. But
That's what I'm talking about.
yeah, what were you going to say about being spooky?
Oh, I have nothing interesting to say. I got all my decorations out, which I don't have a lot of decorations, but I transitioned them from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas to New Year's, and then I cut it out. Then I cut that stuff out. But so I got all my decorations out. There's pumpkins everywhere, and I think we're going to go on a little fall leaf cruise this weekend.
Oh, leaf peeping.
Leaf peeping. And as we all know, leaf peeping is best done from the seat of a bicycle because you can see them really well.
Yes.
Better than from a car because I don't have to look at the road as much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You can go at a different pace. You can kind of see all the different leaves and colors.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And the first week of October in Iowa, in this part of Iowa, is when things really start to kick off. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you view the season. So that's my whole quote unquote interesting thing. But in actual interesting news, I want to give a shout out to Luke Hoffman, who is the brand new executive director of the Iowa Bicycle Coalition.
Yay.
Yeah. So we're so excited. I'm so excited to see where Luke takes it and see new wings and new beginnings in the coalition and just kind of see where he takes it. So
congrats, Luke. Luke is going to be on the podcast in a future episode, so you all can stay tuned to find out more about Luke and his plans for the Iowa Bike Coalition.
Yeah, and I will say that he came to us to the Iowa Bicycle Coalition from the Iowa Rivers Revival. He was their executive director there, so he knows his stuff, and it's really exciting. And I've already seen a couple posts of him out riding bikes. So,
sweet, very good.
So, all right, Murph. So I talked about me. What's new with you?
Well, besides the scary scarecrows in my neighborhood, I am in the frantic final stages of party planning.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I think that I've talked about it on the podcast many times, but I run a bicycle club here in Cedar Rapids, cleverly named Wednesday Night Bike Club. So that probably gives you an idea of what night we ride our bikes.
Yep, absolutely.
And this
Wednesday?
year...
Is it Thursday?
No, but Thursdays I'm usually very tired.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I will say that Wednesday Night Bike Club, I started this club 20 years ago.
Wow.
And we still ride every Wednesday year round. Obviously when it's super, super cold or rainy, we maybe don't ride as many miles, but we still all gather. So I wanted to celebrate 20 years. So I am throwing what's called the first ever Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
Oh, yay. Well, congratulations on 20 years. And the club is still growing strong. It's still awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to you for all that. And I can't wait to see who's inducted into this Hall of Fame.
I know. It's going to be very fun. And most people, the people who are being inducted know, but the rest of the crew does not know. So I can't spill the beans on this podcast because I don't know when this is going to air. I don't want people to know ahead of time.
Oh, exciting. Okay. So, is there anything people can see? Should they go to your Murphology site, social pages to see more or see the results of this prestigious award?
For sure. On Instagram for Murphology, they'll be able to see just, the crowd. But this club, as I said, has been around for 20 years, but there are 800 members,
wow.
which, obviously 800 people do not show up every Wednesday to ride bikes, but it's just such a cool community. And we've done so much more than ride bikes. when the derecho, which is an inland hurricane, came through Iowa. I mean, we were out because really at that point we couldn't ride bikes because there were trees down everywhere. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have really anything. We would gather. We all brought our chainsaws, and we became like this tree removal crew. So that's just one example of how fun it is to have a bike club that does so much more than biking.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say I don't think we mentioned that you're based out of Cedar Rapids, so the derecho really hit hard. And it was such a cool thing to do for your community. And it's the power of biking, baby.
The power of biking.
It's so freaking awesome. Yeah.
Okay. And I also want to give a shout out to a man named Matt from Indiana. He wrote in because he heard us talking on a previous episode. So he said, I listened to your recent podcast asking for listeners to submit suggestions for trail rides you can ride. I'm suggesting the Ohio to Erie Trail. Ooh. And he said it's 326 miles paved except for about 30 miles of crushed gravel. So,
ooh, that sounds cool.
I know. I looked it up. It looks actually like a pretty cool opportunity. So thank you, Matt, for writing in.
And as many of you know, I went to college in Indiana. So go Butler. Okay. Go Bulldogs. Woo. Okay. So what do we have up on the podcast today?
Okay. So today we wrap up our series of rider recaps. And this week we have Jeff, Nancy, and Cole. And each of them are on to talk about RAGBRAI L experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful.
There we go. And I just want to say thank you again to all the writers who took the time to be interviewed for this podcast and for this little segment, because it has been such a cool experience to hear from you all.
Oh, it's so fun to hear everyone's different perspective. It's the same event to all of us, right? It's RAGBRAI, but everybody has such a unique perspective.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of, let's get to it.
Well, how about a warm welcome to Jeff? Thanks for coming on the podcast, Jeff.
You're very welcome. Thanks. Glad to be here.
You bet. Now, are you just getting off of your very first RAGBRAI?
I am indeed. Yes. My first one.
Well, tell the listeners what made you decide to do RAGBRAI this year.
Well, I've ridden bikes either semi-professionally or recreationally for about 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And RAGBRAI is one of those, bucket list things for recreational cyclists. It's something I'd always heard about and never had the opportunity to do. But then with the 50th anniversary coming through, I thought it'd be a great time to give it a shot. So,
yeah.
Yep.
You and thousands and thousands of other people
that
were thinking
there were one or two other people out there, besides me. So, yeah.
Okay, so when you say did you say like semi-professional or at least a different level than recreation at one point in your life?
Yes, I did. I was with a couple of different cycling teams. I live in the St. Louis area. And cycling is very big here. So I was on a couple of teams, that we did some racing in and about the St. Louis area. And, so I did that for about 4 years.
Okay. So you have a little bit of a unique perspective then, because, most of the people I've been interviewing, including myself, are, coming at this from a recreational point of view where I'm not trying to race. I'm just trying to get from point A to point B, see as many things as I can. So did you have a similar perspective, or were you kind of in that, I don't want that guy to go faster than me?
Oh, no. Those days are long gone. And, Clint Eastwood said it best, when a man's got to know when to say when, right? So, I realize I am not that person anymore. So I was there strictly to do recreational. So.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good to know. Tell the listeners maybe some memorable moments from your first RAGBRAI.
Memorable moments from my first RAGBRAI were a temperamental sheep at one of the stops, the little girl that had the sheep in a pen, the sheep did not want to cooperate. So she told me, oh, she got up too early this morning. I thought that was kind of funny that the sheep had gotten up too early.
But it might have been the same sheep that I ran into, because the sheep I was trying to get a photo of, every time I put my camera up, it would look away. It was like intentional. So maybe it was kind of a crabby animal.
Yeah, this one was. Every time I reached in to pet the sheep, it would butt my hand and move my hand away. So it became a battle of wills at that point. It's like, no, I'm going to pet you, but the sheep eventually won out, and I walked away just without a pet. So, but yeah. So, but no, it just actually I was really shocked, and I had heard you mention it on the podcast, and until I actually, how beautiful Iowa really is. And it's, if anybody tells me again that, that it's flat, I think I will, might resort to some type of violence. I'm not sure, but I did like the comparison to a waffle, getting in and out. But there were mornings that we rode out that it's just unspeakable beauty. So I think that's what I'll remember of Iowa, other than some of those hills,
sure,
which was a little shocked at. But
somebody I interviewed earlier was mentioning he was an early riser, so he was up kind of at sunrise,
right.
And just to be able to see Iowa, the rolling hills, but also like the intense humidity made some fog in the morning, so it was just beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. I was just going to say that is one morning I remember rolling out and everybody was commenting how foggy it was. And I couldn't even wear my glasses. I had to take my glasses off because and that was humidity coming out of the corn. But they say that's what makes it sweet. So, that corn ought to be very sweet. So
yeah, I think it'd be ultra sweet. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, speaking of corn, tell us about the food. Were you people either... They usually say that they gain weight on RAGBRAI because there's just so many food options. So how about you?
Right. Well, I went there with the intention of the 4. Corn. You had to have corn. You had to have Mr. Porkchop, obviously.
Yep.
You had to have a piece of peach pie or pie in general, and I had peach pie. And you had to have Beekman's ice cream.
Okay.
So those were the 4. And I'm happy to report that I was successful in trying all 4 of those, and they were all as billed. They were all very delicious. So,
and I think all 4 that you mentioned are items of food that you probably would eat and enjoy in regular life, don't you think?
Well, not Mr. Porkchop necessarily, the 1-inch pork chop, but but a pork chop in general, yes. But they just somehow tasted better dressed in a biking kit, standing alongside the road. So
sweating with a paper towel and hoping you were getting grease all over you.
But it's to go back to the whole RAGBRAI experience. Each food that I had, it comes with a little bit of a story. With Mr. Porkchop setting in the yard of the people that were hosting Mr. Porkchop and hearing their story and how excited they were to have everybody there. And even the non-food items, like, on the tough day, there were people opening, their yards and getting out their hoses and spraying us down and providing us well water. And it was just amazing. The kindness of the people on the route. To me, that was the whole experience of RAGBRAI, was experiencing those people and their generosity and their kindness. So it was very cool.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I really feel like it was a perfect description of Iowa nice when you come rolling through. Like Polk City was one town I remember where every other house there was somebody standing there with a hose or a sprinkler or a water gun. They weren't asked to do that. They just chose to. And I'm sure that they went to dinner that night and were like, what in the heck were these cyclists thinking biking in this hot of weather? But you know what?
Yeah, well, is it Amkey? Is that how you say the name of the town? I think that's how you say it. But it was one of the more
Ankeny.
Ankeny. Okay. Yep. So as we were riding through there, was the first time that I experienced people standing alongside the road holding water out for the riders.
Oh, okay.
And there were 3 little boys lined up there. And I could, we weren't going very fast. And as we were coming through, I saw the little boys, and a couple of riders had taken, they must have been brothers, and they had taken water from everybody but the youngest. He appeared to be at the farthest end of the line, and he was getting upset that the riders were taking water from him. And so I made up my mind I was going to take water from him. And when I did, he handed it to me perfectly. And I went on through, and he turned around and he was screaming, he got it. I gave it to him. And it's like, that's very, very cool. Something as simple like that, hopefully that youngster he'll remember for a long time. So,
yeah, for sure.
cool.
And
Yep.
that will be, he'll be on a podcast in 10 years and be like, my first time I was handing out water, and then I'm like, I'm going to do it.
Yep, I gave that water to that poor old guy riding that bicycle. So.
Now, did you come to Iowa as part of a team, or were you solo, or how did you do RAGBRAI?
No, so I had a group of friends here locally, and we formed a little team called Ruse RAGBRAI Rock Stars. It's kind of hard to say, but there were 6 of us, 5 women and me. There were supposed to be more men, but these guys, there were some injuries prior to the event, so it wound up just being the 5 women and me. So that's how I came up there.
Wow, that's actually sounds pretty fun.
Yep, it was a good time.
And would you say RAGBRAI was what you expected? Better, worse, just different?
Well, what I mentioned to you prior to getting on here, I'm listening to the podcast and the availability of YouTube videos and things, because, I was very curious about, RAGBRAI and trying to prepare for it and train for it and whatnot. And so there were a lot of videos out there of people that record their days. So I think, to be honest, it was kind of what I expected.
Oh, good.
As far as the ride, actually, the structure of it and that kind of thing. But so I think having all of that available. And again, your podcast, I mean, you talk through a lot, and I think it was, other than the crowd, I wasn't really expecting that many people on the road at the same time. But
right.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And in theory, future years will be probably less people and most likely less mileage. So, this was meant to be the rah-rah 50th. And and I'm saying in theory because I have nothing to do with the route. So, hopefully Mr. Matt Phippen is listening to this and hearing how many people are like, it was so many miles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, they kind of let you know how many miles it was. I think, some folks were, I think the heat was the big factor to a lot of it. A lot of people, on the really hilly hot day, they were ill, but I will just tell you, I made a mistake on day 5. I did not eat well the night before.
Yep.
And I suffered because of it. So, I will tell you, the advice I would give anybody is have fun, enjoy it, but remember, you've got a ride to do, right? And because the night before the really hilly hot day, the team wanted to go have Mexican food. And I'm not a big Mexican food fan, but I ate a plate of nachos. As a cyclist, eating a plate of nachos
it's not going to cut it.
Is not what you should be doing before a 90-mile day, right? So,
yes.
But anyway, that would be my advice to people is remember, go have a good time and everything, but you still got 90 miles the next day to put behind you.
Oh,
so
yeah. Today you determines tomorrow you.
Exactly,
so
especially on a bike. So, and just the enormity of the crowd, because there were some things, I would have done, like, for example, getting the beer T-shirt, for example. The first day, I got my first 2 stops in, but then, there were so many people that a lot of times it would take an hour, to go through line and get a beer and whatnot and get back on the road. And for somebody like me, an old codger like me, that's just too long to stand. I've got to keep moving. So, that's just the function of the success of the ride. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I've said this so many times, and I think I'll keep on saying it, but everybody gets to do their own RAGBRAI their own way. So some people will, everybody does their own thing. So that's what makes it so successful. So
absolutely.
Okay, last question.
Sure.
Do you think you'll ever do RAGBRAI again?
If you asked me that the day after, I would have told you no. It's I'm going to go with maybe.
Okay.
Just because, I think it's an experience that you have to do all 7 days, right? And sometimes that's a little tough, with business schedules and things like that to get that many days off in a row. But if the opportunity presented itself, I probably would.
Yeah.
Probably would.
And I think a lot of people have the same comment. The day after RAGBRAI, they're like, no way in hell you're going to get me back on a bike. And then, end of January when the routes announced, people are like, well, gosh, could I get an extra week of vacation?
Yeah, exactly.
And then before you know it, you'll be on the podcast next year.
There you go.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time and
you're very welcome.
Sharing some stories. And I hope that you have a great rest of the summer.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, next up we have Nancy. How are you doing, Nancy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good. Well, tell the listeners maybe where you're from and what the cycling culture is like there.
Okay. So I live in Michigan. I'm in the Detroit area, and there is a pretty big bike club out of Ann Arbor. But I was training with my husband, and I have a friend I train with too. And we've got some paths. We got good enough paths that we could train on here. There's one section by a park that is hilly. It's like a 12-mile there and back. So we trained on that quite a bit. So there's definitely there are places where we could train here with our road bikes.
Of course,
and northern Michigan's really beautiful. We didn't train this time, but there's lots of options for trails up there too.
Well, I was just going to say it's on my bucket list. And of course, I don't have it in front of me to give you the name, but there's some big, huge loop in the Michigan area that I have been hearing about and I want to do. And I think it's like 400 miles. So I don't know if that rings a bell to you, but it's definitely something I want to do.
So I'm wondering if you're thinking, it's called the Dalmac, and it starts in central Michigan, like around East Lansing. And we always describe places in Michigan with our hand because it's shaped like a mitten, but it's kind of like in the middle. And then it goes up to Mackinac, which is at the very top part of the lower peninsula. And there are options. You can do 2-day, 3-day, 4-day, 5-day rides. We have not done it yet, but, like I said, the first week of as done with RAGBRAI, I'm like, oh, I'm not biking for a long time. And now I'm already looking at that.
Oh yeah. But that name sounds familiar.
Yeah. And then there's a Make-A-Wish ride too. That's a 3-day a century each day.
Oh, wow.
So
all right. Well, your
my
legs
husband did that. I have not done that.
I was going to say your legs are ready now after RAGBRAI.
Yeah.
And was this your first RAGBRAI?
It was.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe let's get into it. How did you, I think you said your husband did it as well, but how did you guys decide that this was the year you were going to do RAGBRAI?
So it's funny because it had always been on our radar a little bit. We did Cycle Oregon years ago in the 1990s. And then, we got waylaid with life. And then his college friend did it last year. And apparently last year was a great year. The weather was good. And he just had such a fantastic experience. So it had been on our radar. And then when he was so enthusiastic describing it, we decided, okay, this is the year we're going to do it.
And you picked, one of the longest and the steepest, and then unfortunately one of the hottest. So, do you want to give the listeners kind of your take on how the week went for you?
Sure. So yeah, I was taken aback already the first day by the hilliness, and the first few days I think we still enjoyed, and it was so fun to be in the towns and have them open up to us. And long story short, I had an injury before it even started. Coming out of my hotel room, I lost my balance and like cut my leg. And
Oh, no.
so I had some experience. I know it was so unfortunate. I had some experience with the medics, and even talked to some of the Air Force people. And so they were like so wonderful and supportive. And and I really enjoyed meeting people. I was with my husband and his group of friends, but I really kind of biked alone a lot just because we were going at different paces. I was stopping at the medic tents and, just for various reasons. I always wanted to stop for ice cream, was never going to pass that up. I love the churned ice. Yeah. So yeah, that was the first few days, and then days 5 and 6 were pretty challenging for us. Just like the hill after hill on day 5, and then the hills coupled with the heat on day 6, and then the thunderstorm at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so we ended up we did not do day 7 because we ended up staying at somebody's home on that 6th day. And they offered if we wanted to that they would get our car. But we were fine with that. We ended up doing roughly 440 miles, and we were just pretty spent after those last 2 days. I think we would have, if it wasn't for the hills and the heat, would have done the last day. But we were at peace with all that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting, all the people I've interviewed, there have been so many people that just happen to have or find a homestay on that Friday night. And so, the storm was crazy. It came really fast. But for the most part, at least who I've talked to, people were safe that night.
Yeah. Well, I got back really late that night, and then we hung out at the Hy-Vee and I ate there. So when we got back to the campsite, that's when the storm was starting. And so we went into a shelter, and that's where we kind of hung out, like right by our campsite. And then we went back to our tent, and the air mattresses weren't blown up. We were exhausted. And then a guy in our group, the friends that I was telling you about, my husband's friend, his brother's like, we've got a home and you guys can come stay. And I was just like, oh my God, thank God. And the people were just so nice and helpful. And that was wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, so think back to, packing and getting ready for RAGBRAI. Would you say you packed too much, not enough, or just right?
So I think I watched your video.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yes. And I was just because I was anxious about the whole endeavor, I spent months just researching and learning. And so I have to give myself a pat on the back. I really used my resources to optimize my packing. And I even got those little like funnel sheepy things, those came in handy. And my husband's like, oh, I don't want you peeing in the tent at night. So I'm like, okay, I'll just pee like right outside it. And this might be a little too TMI here. And then for the cornfields, it came in handy because I don't think I've ever drank like that much water, liquid IVs in my life. And so, what comes in must come out.
Yeah, it's gotta come out.
And so I was grateful to have those in the cornfield. I had my little pee bag with the wipes and everything. And and I took the advice of packing each day into one Ziploc bag. That was fantastic. And even with all that preparation, I'm still just not a big camper. And just like, I was still kind of rummaging through things and losing things, but I don't know that I could have done much better because I did I was researching extensively, watching videos and on the Facebook groups, learning everything. So I felt like I was prepared that way.
That's actually pretty good because a lot of, especially like when my first couple of years of RAGBRAI, I bet you I brought back, I don't know, 20% of my stuff that I never even touched, but yet, it was in my bag, so it was still stinky and I had to wash everything anyway. So, kudos to you.
I could have brought a little bit less, like for the evenings, but I mean, I kind of pictured that we were going to go to the concerts, and we didn't go every night, just
Mm-hmm.
because like we'd either get back late or we're tired. So I guess I could have brought a little bit less for the evenings, but it wasn't too much.
Yeah. Well, besides packing, like, can you think back to, once you made the decision to do RAGBRAI, stuff that you were like worried about all the time that maybe once you did RAGBRAI, you're like, why was I worried about that? Like,
Yeah.
anything you remember?
Well, for me personally, I had an injury. I had some Achilles tendonitis, and I was really concerned about that. But I was able to go to PT, and it was kind of
Mm.
getting worse before it got better. But like the first day, and I was taping they were kind of bothering me, and then it was weird. It's like my body just kind of adjusted.
Oh,
I
nice.
guess the one thing that was cool, and I guess I experienced this too when I did Cycle Oregon, is that as you go, at least for me, like I feel physically stronger and better. And so that was something that worked out well. I was super anxious about sleeping in tents because it's really not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was okay. I mean, we went with a charter service and the air mattresses were fine and the tent fans were a big must. We had the tent fans in the sleeping bag. And so all of that actually ended up maybe going a little better than what I expected.
Good, good.
And
And
our preparation helped.
yeah. And do you think RAGBRAI is something that you would do again, or do you have other things that you want to do in the future?
Well, it's so funny because I've just like come from one place to the other. Like at the end, I was thinking like, oh no, I'm not going to do that, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get on my bike, and now I'm looking at duathlons, and now I'm looking at bike rides in Michigan,
Yeah.
and so yeah, at the rate I'm going, we could be doing that again.
Yeah, I definitely we'll call this year kind of a type 2 fun where, like that Thursday and Friday in the heat in the hills, I was just like, what? Why am I
Yeah,
spending vacation time doing this?
yeah,
Like, this is crazy. But of course, now today, while I'm interviewing you, I'm like, oh, I wish I was back there again, which is
yeah,
crazy to think about. But well,
yeah.
any advice you would give somebody who maybe is listening and like, I need to do RAGBRAI some year?
Well, yeah, I would definitely do again the preparation. With your video was great for the packing preparation, and then just reading like all the Facebook posts and the comments. I felt like all of that was super helpful, and I can tell you a really quick, like, kind of funny story of my experience if you want.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the nights, our campsite was kind of far away from the showers, and I can't even remember what town. It might have been Des Moines, but there were like these shuttles that like people would sit in the seats in the middle, and then there were like the bars. And so my husband and I were like desperate to take a shower, and so we had to hang on the bars. And so I'm hanging on the bars. I don't know if you can picture this. And so my armpits are like exposed to everybody. I'm like, oh my God, I probably really stink. And you guys are all having to smell my armpits. And so that happened. Then fast forward the next day, I was riding by myself and I was a little bit concerned about my bike because I think in the fall I had in the beginning, I kind of tweaked something on it. So these two ladies bike up the hill. They had the same type of bike as me too. We all had our Cervelos, and they're like, "You're the armpit lady."
Oh, no. Are you kidding me?
So I'm cracking up. I'm like, "Oh my God! Never in my life would I think I would be known as the armpit lady." But it was funny. And then I was like, "Yeah, my bikes are like a little bit off." And so the Air Force people came. They were great, and they were working so hard to try to fix my bike. And those ladies stayed with me the whole time. They were so sweet. They were chatting with me, and we biked into the next city. I had dinner with them. And so it was just kind of a funny way that we met, and they were lovely, and I really enjoyed my time with them. So yeah, that's just my little story.
And
What experience.
and in future years, if you run into those ladies again, you are forever the armpit lady, right?
Yeah. I don't know what to do with that. But yeah.
But also you made a great friendship out of the deal. So that's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
worth it.
Yeah, I have their like we exchanged pictures. We got some cool pictures together too. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy, for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your stories. And it's just makes rethinking about RAGBRAI even more fun to hear everyone's
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, well, and thank you for all you're doing. I think it's so nice to connect people because it really is kind of a daunting endeavor, and just kind of having a community around it, I think can be super helpful.
Yes, I agree. All right. Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. A warm welcome to Cole. How's it going, Cole?
It's going good. How are you today?
Good, good. So here we are. Gosh, it seems like it's been at least 6 months since we experienced RAGBRAI, but it's really only been,
Right.
not even a couple weeks. So are you in recovery mode still, or are you back to real life?
Back to real life. It didn't take too long to recover.
Oh, good, good. Well, tell the listeners where you live now, and maybe if there's a cycling culture or what it's like there.
I live in Marysville, Kansas, which is right between Lincoln, Nebraska and Manhattan, Kansas.
Mm.
And there is, even right here locally, there's a big cycling culture. Not something I've been a part of before this year.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of joined in this year in preparation of RAGBRAI, but we have a very good local bike shop and cycling club, and a lot of them ride our rail trail that runs from Marysville, Kansas to Lincoln, Nebraska.
Ooh.
Or there's a big group that do a lot of gravel riding here.
I was going to say, I did Gravel Worlds last year, and that was based out of Lincoln. So I have experienced some of your gravel roads in that area.
Yes, we actually have, even in our little town of Marysville, coming up in September will be the 10th annual Pony Express Gravel Dash, and we have various lengths of rides and races. So it's a good culture here as far as having opportunity to get out on a bicycle.
Right, right. And I would guess your terrain and scenery is similar to Iowa because you're pretty close.
Yes, very similar.
Okay, so tell us your story on how you decided to do RAGBRAI.
Well, my first introduction to RAGBRAI was when I was a kid. We lived in Iowa until 4th grade. And we lived in the little town of Milo, just south of Indianola. And I remember going to swimming lessons one day, and there was thousands of people coming through our town of about 800 people on bicycles. And I thought I had stumbled into the Tour de France or something. I really thought they were all celebrities. I had no idea what was going on. I remember finding a Sharpie and having people signing my bath towel on the way to swimming lessons.
That's awesome.
And then we got on the bus to go to the next town, and even along the way, different RAGBRAI riders were stopping the bus and giving the kids necklaces and candy, and it was just like this big hoopla that I had never seen before. So
it sounds like you became the celebrity at some point.
Yeah. So then we moved away later that year out of Iowa, and we've lived around the Midwest, but Iowa always felt like home. And so my brother and I have always wanted to do RAGBRAI, and the stars aligned this year. Not because of the 50th year, it just worked out to be the 50th year, and we decided to take the plunge and knock it off the bucket list.
And so have you been a biker your entire life, or is this kind of a new experience altogether?
This is brand new. Of course, as kids, we had bicycles, but
sure.
Putting on any kind of miles that represent RAGBRAI, this is a first. My brother and I bought bicycles back in January or February, right after the route release, and started to prepare. And so that we're pretty new to the whole sport.
Wow. And you, not only did you pick, an epic event like biking across the state of Iowa, you picked a year that was full of crazy weather and heat and hills. So
Yes.
Tell us about your experience of biking across Iowa.
Well, just on that note, I talked to several RAGBRAI veterans throughout the week, and I feel like maybe there was some recency bias, but I know after the day going to Tame and Toledo from Des Moines, many of them said that was the hardest day of RAGBRAI they'd ever had.
Oh, wow.
And so that felt like even more of an accomplishment. But again, maybe there was some recency bias there. But RAGBRAI was fantastic. It was exactly what I expected it to be, with the huge crowds, and not everything's perfect, but you just embrace the adventure. I mean, everything was perfect for me.
Yeah.
You hear people say different things, but it was everything I expected as far as crowd size, the experience, the food. And what I expected, but you still just can't appreciate enough is all the volunteers and all the towns that welcome you there and want to showcase their town, because I know having kids and a career and different things, it takes a lot of extra time to pay it forward in your community and give that community service time. And so the fact that there's that many people across Iowa that will do that is like the crowning jewel of RAGBRAI.
I agree. It's just amazing to think that, as you roll into a town, like you get into your habit of all I have to do today is get up, ride my bike, find food, go to bed, repeat. And to think all of the work that those, and most of them are volunteers in those communities put in to help us have an amazing week it's just mind-blowing.
For sure. I remember one guy, they had the shuttle buses in every town, which is not something I expected and was very much appreciated. And sometimes they took a while, but, to be expected. But I think in Carroll, we were on some guy's party bus, and I was thinking to myself, he's probably not getting paid to do this. He's got a party bus and he volunteered for the night. And it was things like that made all the difference in our accessibility to their town. And we really appreciated that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's got to be, a memory that's going to last forever. The fact that you got to do this with your brother.
For sure. I didn't see much of him. He turned out to be a much stronger rider than I was, but we caught up in the evenings and we were able to share. It's funny. We did it together. We camped together every night. But we had very different experiences, and it was fun to share those based on the times we went through different towns and things. We had a different experience, but it was fun to get together in the evenings and share what we had a difference in.
Yeah. And how about like the experience as far as vendors and food and water? Like, did you feel like you got the full RAGBRAI experience for that?
I did. I felt like my kids have brought me a significant more amount of patience than I had pre-kids. And now after RAGBRAI, I have learned that no line is too long and it will soon pass. And you just jump in line and wait your turn.
Like, what else do you have to do, right?
I have even more patience now.
Yes, exactly. And did you experience like, Beekman's ice cream and a pork chop and all of the popular places?
I did. I definitely had, in this day and age, especially with YouTube, and it seems like cyclists and filming things to put on YouTube go hand in hand as I've looked at even some other events, but I'm almost an over preparer. So I definitely had all those traditional RAGBRAI things that I wanted to hit, almost like bucket list items. And my brother, he just kind of was he didn't know nearly as much in preparation. So it was fun to see what he chose to go see. But yes, I went to Mr. Porkchop, the craft beer tent, Beekman's ice cream. I think my favorite of the week was Chris Cakes.
Oh, yeah.
So I enjoyed all of those things.
And then, of course, sprinkled into all of that are all the small communities that have their restaurants open and their church basements open and the Amish pie. Like, oh my gosh, there were just... I would say most people probably gain weight after RAGBRAI rather than lose.
I certainly didn't lose any.
Okay, so you said that you were an over-planner, an over-analyzer. Did you pack too much stuff, not enough stuff, or were you just right?
It was just right, and I wish I had just the right amount of things and maybe a bag that was just slightly too small. So you still had to really plan and get it stuffed in there every morning because, of course, it never packs up the second, third, and fourth day as easily as the first day.
For sure, yeah.
The saving grace was, and I think I talked to a lot of people that had a similar experience. In Des Moines, there was many people that had a family or friend, and we stayed in the RAGBRAI camp and used the RAGBRAI bag services all week. But on Wednesday night, we went and stayed with my grandma in Des Moines, and I was able to freshen everything up with some laundry, get rid of a few things I wouldn't need for the rest of the week. And that was have air conditioning in a bathroom for the night. And that was like the tale of two halves. It was great.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to like get one good night's sleep. You didn't have to hear the zippers opening and shutting of tents, all of that good stuff, I'm sure. And
I'm very fortunate that I know it was recommended to bring earplugs, and I didn't because I'm fortunate that those things don't bother me too much. So,
oh yeah, earplugs would be a deal breaker for me, I think, if I was still camping in the official campground. Anything memorable that you want to share, besides what you've already shared?
When I when we talked about going on RAGBRAI, it's like you want to go for the hoopla and to feel all the good vibes and the energy. And my main goal was just to see like the true Americana of the stops out in the middle of the country, of the kids selling their lemonade. And of course, got to experience that in full effect. And then the things that you hear about Iowa Nice, it's like I've grown up in the Midwest my whole life, so you know that that's out there. It was so nice for the whole week, though. In a world divided of politics and everything else, like there was just none of that for a whole week.
Yeah.
And it was just a group of people with a common goal. And some of the things I saw are the most memorable things, and they really, on a day-to-day basis, they should be small acts of kindness, but they seemed like the biggest thing when you have that many people. And for example, one of them was, I don't even remember the town, but we were in a gas station. Of course, the line wrapped around the gas station inside. By the time you got to the counter, you had eaten and drank everything you wanted to pay for.
Right.
And when I walked in, I noticed that, like happens throughout the week, there wasn't enough. The trash can was overflowing. And the gentleman in front of me paid for his things, and he went out and saw that. And he came back and asked the lady who was working by herself, do you have a roll of trash bags? And he went out, and when I walked out, him and a half a dozen other RAGBRAI riders had bagged up 4 bags of trash and put a fresh one in.
Oh, wow.
And it just made, that lady had no idea that she even had that out there, and now she didn't have to deal with it. And it's stuff like that you kick yourself, because you're like, well, I just walked in and saw that and I didn't do anything about it. And you start to look for those opportunities just to be helpful. And I think if you can take that from RAGBRAI and carry it on after the fact, that is maybe the most important thing of the whole ride.
Oh, for sure. Just understanding what Iowa Nice means and kind of taking it back to the real world. And like you said, patience. I mean,
yes.
Lines are lines. Like, what else do you have to do, right?
Yep.
Well, Cole, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And hopefully you and your brother will come back to Iowa again and ride your bikes.
Well, I tell you what, when my brother has not enjoyed riding his bike at all. I think he blasted through the ride because it was just like, I got to get done and get off this bike. And I really assumed I would do this ride and sell my bike after, and I've come to enjoy it. And we have some great gravel opportunities like we touched on around here. So I think I'm going to keep on going. So. Oh,
that's awesome. That's another great result of RAGBRAI.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you for doing the podcast. I got a lot of information off of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole.
Yep. Have a good day.
Well, listeners, that is it for this week. We both want to thank you for tuning in to listen to the Just Go Bike podcast.
And if you'd like to contact us with a comment about the podcast, or maybe you have a topic in mind, you can reach us at justgobikepodcast@gmail.com. Or you can also follow us on social media at Just Go Bike on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, especially if you're a fan. And if you have any extra time, pop on over to the Murphology podcast for more bike adventure interviews.
All right, that's a wrap. We'll be back next week. Until then, just go bike!